This week's episode is really about community. How jazz is created, how it's protected, and how it's carried forward. Because jazz doesn't exist in isolation. It exists inside relationships between musicians, between generations, between artists and audiences, and now even between artists and technology. Today, I'm going to talk about 3 stories that on the surface feel very different. An incident at the Smalls Jam session, a major AI deal between Suno and Warner Brothers, and Jazz Congress 2026 in New York. But they're all asking the same question. How do we move jazz forward without losing the humanity that makes it matter? Each one shows a different side of what it means to be part of a living musical culture. How we treat each other, how we protect creative work, and how we come together to shape what's next. So let's start with something that reminds us just how fragile and how important jazz community really is. So, Smalls is a club in New York City that has been around for quite a while. They host a number of really great performances with some of New York's finest jazz musicians, and one cool thing they do is they do stream a lot of these shows. Now, Smalls hosts a weekly jam session, and this is a well-known session in New York that a lot of people attend. And jam sessions are an important part of the jazz community for many reasons. They're a training ground for many young musicians to build their chops. They're even, for more experienced musicians, a place where they can try things out. It's a community gathering point, a place where jazz musicians can connect, maybe form artistic relationships that they might not have done otherwise, and bounce ideas off each other. In all, it's a place for growth, humility, and in some ways, it's a place for hierarchy, where younger musicians can interact with and learn from more experienced musicians. Now, at the beginning of the year, there was an incident at Smalls where a guitar player was sitting in on a tune, and after the tune, he got up and started yelling at the saxophone player things like, "Thanks for giving me a solo." He was calling himself a self-taught legend, and then just saying all sorts of rude things at the other musicians, yelling at the band, telling them they don't know how to play any of the songs. He could play Spain, but perfectly, but none of them could play Spain. And he was very confrontational and kind of started a little bit of an aggressive thing with the other musicians. Now, a lot of us have seen this. Like I said, Smalls live streams the jams. So this is up online. You can go check it out. I'll put a link in the show notes so you can see this. And this was kind of sad to see happen. And there has been a lot of discussion since then about jam session etiquette and what's right or wrong about jazz sessions. Because, there's a lot of legacy around it. We talk about things like cutting sessions where musicians try to outplay other musicians. And we talk about maybe some gruff musicians telling younger players how it is. But that all happens, but that's a different thing. Because jam sessions are really about community. They're a place where young and old musicians come together, they make music, and those interactions help them learn from each other. Everyone gets schooled sometimes on a jam session. It's part of the process. We have all gotten up on stage with more experienced musicians And after the song's over, when we're walking off the stage with our tail between our legs, they're telling us all the things we need to practice and all the things we need to work on and all the things that make jazz the way it is. Yeah, sometimes that's hard in the moment, but in the long run, it really helps you grow. And, when you come back and those older musicians see that you've worked on stuff, you start building that respect, that relationship. It's a big, big thing. And, I think there's a piece of me that feels for this guitar player to a certain degree because, it is hard to work on a song for a long time, then go into a session and not be able to play a solo or whatnot. I feel that. But hey, that's real. As a bass player, I've gone to jam sessions and played walking bass lines all night long and never play a solo. There are young players, this happened to me in my younger days, where I would wait all night to get up on stage. And, the older players might make me wait till the last tune of the night to get up and play. Stuff like that happens, and that's part of the learning experience. We all need to earn our way onto that stage, and we all need to take those lessons and come back, build on them, and come back. Because, as hard as that can be sometimes, this community can't be about ego. It can't be about, I'm so great and I deserve all of these things, even though I have never earned them. That sort of entitlement just doesn't work in jazz. So it was really sad to see this musician be confrontational and expect all of those things to happen. And, a lot of people have been talking about this jam session since then, and I really enjoyed a video that Jason Marsalis put up on YouTube where he's talking about it. I'll put a link to that in the show note as well, where he's talking about a lot of the same things about, that's not cool to do on a jam session, but he makes a point how this is not just about a jam session, but maybe this is a reflection on our culture in the United States right now, where through politics and through commerce and all of these things, we have become too self-focused. We have become too willing to step on other people to work our way up that hierarchy, and we're losing community awareness. And the funny thing is, as Jason points out, that just doesn't work in jazz. Jazz is a team sport. Jazz is about collective improvisation. And that's about listening, living in the moment, giving, sometimes taking, but it's gotta be about the relationship. And I think that's something to think about. And I think it's something to think about for those of us who might feel that our country in this time is really experiencing a lot of those things that Jason was talking about. Maybe jazz is the answer to some of this, and some of the way that maybe we can find some answers to move forward as human beings. Really thought-provoking stuff. And one more thing, I just wanted to kind of throw out there too about this session. So this guitar player made a mistake, and I hope that he learned from it. I hope he goes back to that session, and I hope that he brings a better kind of side of himself to the bandstand. But I wonder if that'll happen, because unfortunately, after this event, this guitar player and everything he said and did basically became a big internet meme and has gone all over, whether you're on TikTok or Instagram Reels, all over social media. You're going to see things about him. Hey, you didn't let me take a solo. You're going to see jokes about how people can play Spain perfectly. And basically, there is a public shaming going on about this musician taking something that was wrong, a mistake he made, and turning it into permanent internet ridicule. And I just cannot hang with that because, again, jam sessions about community. It's the place where we can make mistakes and we can grow from them. Why would anyone make any effort to go back to that place when they have just been around the world shamed for this? I just can't endorse that, and I'm really disappointed to see a lot of people in our jazz community taking that stand and turning this guy into a big joke. Let's help him grow. That's what the community's about. Regardless of whether or not we can see this all around the world on the live stream, we need to hold on to that sense of community that jam sessions foster and not let him become the butt of everyone's joke. We need better etiquette inside jam sessions, and we need better compassion outside of them. I think two key things. And that actually leads us directly into the next story, because this isn't just about behavior at jam sessions. It's about how technology is changing the way we interact with music, with artists, and with each other. Back in November, Warner Brothers Music and Suno made a deal that they called a first of its kind partnership that settled a big lawsuit that Warner Music Group had with Suno. Now, if you're not familiar with what Suno is, that is an online AI tool where you can put in a prompt and it will create a piece of music. You could say, make a funky dance tune, and it will. You can feed it lyrics, it'll build a song around that. It will make everything from EDM to hip hop to rock to country to, yes, jazz too. So this has been a big issue for a lot of music companies because obviously this AI has been trained on copyrighted music. This large tech company did not take any consideration for artists. They did not take any consideration for the law of copyright. They obviously just took as much music as they could take, train their models, and now it spits out tracks that do sound pretty darn good. They're always a little funky, they're always a little off because the technology is still evolving, but some of it is just really amazing. Now, because of this, and because of this obvious use of this music, a lot of the big record companies have sued Suno, and this is the solution that Warner Music has come to. Their deal is where Warner Music Group is going to license its catalog to Suno for its AI music generator, which will then allow users to create songs using Warner Music Group's artists' voices or styles. Now, right away, that makes me cringe. But even worse, Warner Music is framing this as a good thing for artists. It's saying that artists will have opt-in consent, where Warner will not do anything with Suno until the artist says it's okay. They say that artists will get compensation for their work. And they say that there will be no more copyright infringes from Suno. This has never been done. You have seen recently in the last couple months too, Disney make a deal with ChatGPT to use some of the likenesses of their characters, but this is the first time we're seeing it in music. This is really something to think about, because we have to question a couple of things about this. Warner's putting it out to say that they've solved the problem and this is going to be great, but I have questions. First of all, the opt-in that artists will have. How is this going to work? We have gotten no information about this. Is this just going to be in an artist's contract and they have to then go back and work their way out of it? Is it just going to be a deal? Well, if you want to be on the Warner Music label, you have to do this. Or is it going to be the way it should be, where when an artist signs a deal with Warner, they specifically are said, hey, do you want to be part of this deal or not? And what does that mean for legacy artists? Warner's been around for a long time. What does that mean for those artists who may not be on Warner anymore, but Warner still owns their catalog? That is serious stuff to think about. I also question, how much are artists really going to get paid for this? I am always suspicious of big business a little bit, and I wonder whether Warner Brothers was protecting artists or they were protecting their own pocketbook. Are artists really going to get a good chunk of this, or is this going to smell like major label deals with Spotify, where major labels are making lots of money, but artists are making next to nothing? This is really, we need more information about this. We need to know. And then let's think about how this is going to work for listeners and how it's going to change our fundamental listening experience. What's going to change? Well, what's going to change is a listener is going to be on Suno and they are going to create a bunch of music that they created, that they like, that they want to listen to, and that could fundamentally take over for all of the music that maybe they're streaming now, or hopefully they bought. Any of that can be taken over by this new model. And boy, if compensation for artists is not part of this in a big way, this is problematic, because artists are already getting very small paychecks from places like Spotify. Well, if that disappears, where are artists going to make money from recorded music? And should they even record music anymore? There are lots of questions around this. And you might be thinking, well, what does that have to do with jazz? You were just talking about jazz as a community event, as a team sport, as something that one machine cannot create, cannot replace. Well, let's think about it for a minute, and let's think about what artists this might impact. There are a number of artists who are currently on the roster for Warner through relationships with labels like None Such, which are affiliated with Warner Brothers. Just a few names: Cecile McLaurin-Salvant, Pat Metheny, Mary Halverson, Joshua Redman, Brad Meldau. What if all of those artists were somehow fed into the AI and we didn't listen to their music anymore, but we listened to an AI-generated version of them? That's scary. And it doesn't end there, because we're talking about legacy catalog too. Warner has some names right there. Let me give you a few: John Coltrane, Charles Mingus, the Modern Jazz Quartet, Ornette Coleman could all be part of this. So a user could, in theory, say, well, make me a hip hop recording that has such and such rapper playing over this, and then have John Coltrane do a tenor saxophone solo on it, and have Ornette Coleman fill in with saxophone riffs. What are we talking about here? What is that? And take out the money piece of it, the artistry piece of that. To me, that is just tearing apart the legacy of people like John Coltrane, people like Ornette Coleman. It's taking away opportunities for people like Cecile McLaurin-Salvant, for Brad Meldau. This is serious stuff that we should be thinking about and we should be proactive about. Now, don't get me wrong. I use AI and I know that it has its place in our future, but I think we need to consider how that is going to affect music and the people behind it. Thought-provoking stuff. Which brings us to the final story, because while AI is shaping the future of jazz digitally, Jazz Congress shows us how the jazz community is still coming together in real physical space to shape its future collectively. Jazz Congress is a 2-day annual conference and industry gathering produced by Jazz at Lincoln Center in New York City, aimed at bringing together jazz artists, industry professionals, media, and presenters from around the world. It's not a public concert festival, but it's a forum for ideas, advocacy, professional development, and community building within jazz. I think this is amazing because of what we were just talking about, things that affect the community, things like AI. The jazz community can't deal with that if we don't work together. We need to have gathering points like this where we can talk about these things, where we can take a minute and slow down and find the music's place in the modern world, not just in terms of artistry, but how artists can build sustainable careers, how the greater ecosystem can support jazz and can thrive on its own. I am so glad to see an event like this happening. Now, Jazz Congress just happened on January 7th and 8th. It was held at the Frederick P. Rose Hall at Jazz at Lincoln Center, and it had so many different people. Jazz artists, managers, agents, journalists, radio programmers, educators, festival and club bookers, radio labels, and other jazz professionals. What an amazing group of people to bring together. I'm telling you right now, I want to be there too. This is something that I find so exciting. I want to be there. I'm going to make my 2027 plans now. If it doesn't happen, 2028. But this is an event I want to be a part of and, see what I can do on this YouTube channel to help jazz. Now, the way this is structured, there's a lot of community gatherings, but there's also panels, workshops, networking, keynotes, and discussions, all designed to foster dialogue about business, culture, and the future of jazz. These panels were live streamed as well, so you can check them out. Now, the overarching mission is to exchange ideas to nurture and grow the jazz community, supporting not just performance, but the ecosystem that keeps jazz thriving globally. Super cool. Let me just tell you a little bit about what types of things were discussed at the 2026 Jazz Congress. They had a section on technology and audience development, where they had a panel about how artists are using and shaping technology creatively and professionally, featuring artists and foundations. They had a radio and media panel where DJs or hosts and programmers would listen to new music and give it feedback as to whether it could get radio play. This is a practical learning lesson, not just for musicians, but boy, for business people to see the way the trends are going and what sort of music is going to get out there through radio. They had a panel on identity and representation, which was specifically focused on women in rhythm. This is amazing. It was a session celebrating the role of women in rhythmic innovation and cultural expression within jazz, spotlighting voices that have historically been underrepresented. Important stuff. We are far too often in the jazz community. We work as a boys club far too often. It is so amazing to see this panel happening. A panel on global collaboration, stronger together between the US and Europe, exploring transatlantic collaboration among jazz presenters and artists, crucial right now at a time where we are finding so much fraction in the politics. A panel on streaming, jazz and Spotify, that unpacked how platforms are reshaping the way that people listen to jazz, the way that jazz is distributed, and the economics behind it. We are in that knee deep. We need to be thinking about that right now. It is amazing that they are talking about that. And then, of course, hey, you get a bunch of jazz musicians together, you've got to talk about jazz. So there was a panel called Still Kind of Blue, celebrating Miles Davis at 100, talking about how Miles's enduring influence and legacy continues to impact and shape the way that jazz evolves. Really cool stuff. And I just want to shout out something I thought was amazing to see, was the awarding of the Bruce Lundvall Visionary Award to Lee Mergner. Now, this is an annual honor presented at Jazz Congress that recognizes extraordinary leadership and vision in expanding the audience for jazz. Specifically, it celebrates individuals who have made specific contributions for jazz, for artists, for the music itself, and for its audience beyond just performing. The award was created in 2014 to honor the legacy of Bruce Lundvall, a legendary jazz record executive and advocate who championed numerous artists and helped cultivate jazz artists for decades. Now, at 2026, the award was presented to Lee Mergner by one of my favorites, bassist Christian McBride, who himself was a past recipient of the Visionary Award. He won in 2017. And this whole thing of these two coming together really underscored the mutual respect among leaders in the jazz community. It was really touching to see. Now, if you're not familiar with who Lee Mergner is, I'm sure that in one way, shape, or form, he has touched you in the jazz world. He served for more than 30 years as editor and publisher of Jazz Times. This is a major magazine that won multiple awards, really shaped critical discourse around jazz, and helped promote the art form for decades. He also, funny enough, co-created this award along with Don Lusoff and Peter Gordon. He founded the Jazz Connect Conference in 2012, and then he produced it through 2017. He also produced the Jazz Industry Track at the International Association of Jazz Educators Conference, and he ran the Jazz Times convention in earlier decades. Since 2018, in partnership with Jazz at Lincoln Center, he's been a co-organizer of what we now call Jazz Congress, in the effort to help sustain and grow one of the most important annual professional gatherings in jazz. He has done so much for the music. He might not be a musician that we watch on stage or we listen to on recordings, but he has made sure that we can watch musicians and listen to recordings from jazz musicians for decades. Now, his acceptance speech was really touching. He really was humble about receiving an award that he helped create. He actually said how at first he refused to take the award because he didn't think that was right, but eventually people talked him into it, and he emphasized how this just really reinforced his belief in community, collaboration, and intergenerational support in jazz. It was really great to see. Congratulations, Lee. You deserve it. What a great event. And again, I'm going to be there one of these days. This really gets me pumped up. Looking forward to someday being a part of it. When you put all three of these stories next to each other, they start to form a bigger picture. The jam session at Smalls reminds us that jazz is built on respect, patience, and shared responsibility. The Suno Warner deal shows us that even the future of AI has to be grounded in some way. We need to question it. We need to find ways to move it forward. And Jazz Congress proves that the jazz world is still actively gathering to shape its future instead of just reacting to it. Jazz has always evolved, but it only evolves well when community stays at the center of the conversation. Not ego, not speed, not technology for its own sake. People. That's what keeps jazz alive. That's what keeps it honest. That's what makes it worth protecting. We talked about a lot of stuff today. I would love to know your opinion on any of this. Throw your thoughts down in the comment. Let's have a community conversation and keep it going. Thanks for hanging out, everyone. This was This Week in Jazz. I'm Chip Boaz. I will see you soon.